Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, The Druid, by Jeff Wheeler. I have some feelings about this one, and I think the best way I can summarize it is when you're reading a book and it's painfully obvious that the author's personal feelings are baked into the story. That happens a lot, but sometimes it's because of a philosophical thing. The Ascent of Rum Doodle is a comedy built around the idea that all of these adventure stories sound just so outlandish, and the goal is to make an even more outlandish story. And there are all sorts of other stories where the author's personal politics and personal religious beliefs just slide on into the setting, and this one got me thinking in the same way. And when I finished the book, I got to the last page, which says about the author, and it says, Jeff is a husband, father of 5, and devout member of his church. He lives in the Rocky Mountains. It's worded in a particular way that got the little bells in my head ringing. As soon as I looked it up, I knew exactly why. I'll get back to that point later on, and as I describe the plot of the book, I think the listener, the audience, you, will understand why those bells were ringing in my head as well. Now, first of all, I'm going to say this is a book by 47 North, the publishing company. I really love it. It has that little space needle icon in the O. What a beautiful icon. Jeff Wheeler has a lot of books published. The First Argentines story, the Grave Kingdom series, the Harbinger series, the King Fountain series, Legends of Muirwood trilogy, Covenant of Muirwood trilogy, Whispers from Morrowind trilogy. The list goes on. This particular book is effectively a prequel to a lot of those Muirwood stories from everything I've seen online. And it is copyright 2022. And the cover design is by Kirk DuPont and Dog-Eared Design. The first thing you see after the title page is this map. And what I don't like about it is that it's not in-depth enough. Like, they could have made it landscape and made you turn the page to see it, and then you would get more detail. But instead, they kept it relatively low resolution, and so you don't have too many details. There's a inlet that you're supposed to zoom in and kind of see, but again, there's no real in-depth view there. The story opens up with the main character, Eileen, and Eileen is a character who lives kind of on a frontier settlement. It is very close to the neighboring barbarians, effectively. And she lives in a abbey, or something akin to that, where the Roman Catholic Church analog is in charge and stamping down hard on any religion they can find. So, in this case, Eileen is a young orphan who lives and works at this big ol' abbey, and she is selected among a group that are going to be working in a fledgling monastery in a foreign land that is finally accepting this Catholic Church analog into its country, into its borders. The new location she's going to be at is in a swamp and they are literally draining the swamp to make it habitable for the overarching church. Included in the setting is that there is a religion, the Druids, that have a high-ranking member of that faith imprisoned and in the process of interrogation, but rather, I get the impression from what I remember that this representative kind of worked with the church in the past, but he hid the most sacred objects he knew of away so that the church couldn't find it. The church knows that he did this, but can't extract from him where this information is, where these sacred texts are. And so Eileen is tasked with being his attendant, but also with gradually coaxing that information out of him to play the part of the inquisitive young mind that can be influenced by him, but to spy on this guy as well. On the travel over to this new location, Eileen is effectively tasked with cooking and cleaning. She's a camp aide, in addition to her new role as the serving in the kitchen and serving this archdruid. They are attacked in the night by some druids, and they say druids can be men or women, and she sees another footprint, points to it. There's another. He gave her an amused smile. I know, the trail leads northeast. After we get to the abbey, I'll send some of my hunters to track the prints. They were unwise to cross us so openly. She looked at him with curiosity. I've heard they can transform into animals. Can they turn others into them too? No, that's just a fantasy, he said to her, his brow narrowing in disapproval. She felt a flush of shame. I didn't say I believed it. Artists told me it wasn't true. The questions a person asks say a lot about them, he said, looking her in the eye. But the work they do says even more. You're a hard worker, Eileen. I try to be. She wasn't sure how to take his comment. Do you know what the aldermaston has asked me to do? He nodded and straightened, his look hardening. He shouldn't have chosen you. She straightened as well, her feelings wounded again. You don't think he can trust me? No doubt you've earned his trust these many years at the Abbey. Then why say what you did? Or are you being chopsy? Chopsy? I haven't heard that one in a while. Though he didn't say so, she suspected that he judged her for her slang and her questions. But he was being a true bore, and she had every right to tell him so. He looked at her for a moment as if studying an insect, then said, I have my reasons, and turned and walked away. In this case, she feels like she's challenged by that, and Captain Howell, who is the adversary in that discussion, is keeping her down. As we later learn in the story, the sacred texts that are being searched for are written on stone tablets, and that you need a certain kind of key to read them. So not only are the texts hidden, so is the key. In this, it becomes kind of apparent what kind of religion is being dealt with here, but I digress. For the most part, this seems very Celtic Druidic. It borrows a lot from the mythos built up around them, that they couldn't use iron, that iron was toxic to them, that these druids could cast barbarian magic that could turn them into animals. They could see through animals' eyes. They performed sacrifices, so on and so forth. On top of that, the druid that they are trying to extract information from used to be part of the church and then became a druid. And so he is not just a convert, but a powerful convert. At one point in time, some dark druids, which by name you can understand those are members of the druid faith that are against this archdruid, Mordaunt by name. The encounter is written here. There you are, said the dark druid. We've caught you at last. Leave, or it will not end well for you. Mordaunt said calmly. The dark druid sneered at him. Tell us where you hid it. Where is the Sefer Yetzirah? Where did you hide it, old man? In a place you will never find it. Leave, I warn you. The dark druid lifted his crooked staff and stepped forward. The eyes of his companions were crazed with rage and bloodlust. She could sense the myriad ones inside them, compelling them to do and be their worst. Like all the 12, you are squeamish about allowing harm to come to the innocent. I'll kill those waifs. I'll bash in their heads one by one until you tell me where you hid it. He glanced at Eileen and grinned savagely, beginning with her. No, Artis shouted in outrage. Mordaunt stood immovable. I will not tell you. Their blood will be on your soul, shouted the dark druid. Mordaunt looked at him and held out his palm. On yours. Keiv had. The words of power invoked the medium, and Eileen watched in astonishment as a wind seemed to blow from Mordaunt's hand and tear through the people clustered in the doorway and the corridor beyond it. The men crumpled to the ground and groaned in pain, blood booming on their arms and staining their tunics. She had seen no weapon strike, but all of them had collapsed as if pierced with invisible swords. Some appeared dead. So Mordaunt, even imprisoned, is not truly imprisoned. He kind of is there partially by choice, but also partially because, as you find out later in the story, the person in charge of this new abbey cannot actually use the magic of his faith. That members of his faith can perform miracles, but that he has never been able to. And so the reason why this priest in particular is searching for these sacred texts from Mordaunt is because he wants to be able to read them and thus gain the power to use those miracles that he should be able to do from his church. Whereas the Dark Druids are looking for it because Mordaunt took it kind of against the will of a certain faction within the Druids and hid it as well. So there are two different faiths against this one person who has served within the hierarchies of both faiths. The story progresses with Captain Howell continuing to be adversarial towards Eileen, but Eileen getting the knowledge of where the sacred texts are, finding people that are cooperative towards her, and finding a way out of the abbey and into the hands of people that are willing to help her. In the story, she's becoming one of these druids, but taught by Mordaunt, and thus she is a better druid than she otherwise would be. Now, the climax comes and Captain Howell is still very antagonistic. He is the primary antagonist of the story. He goes from being suspicious of Eileen to outwardly combative towards her. And now I'm going to reveal the part of this book that made me have those alarms ringing in my head, and it's that Eileen is very explicitly converting into a Mormon analog church, and the whole sacred texts that you need a specific key to read is one of the primary aspects of foundational Mormonism. And the way the About the Author section is written also got those alarm bells ringing in my head, because they go out of their way to not mention what church he is a devout member of, but also says he's living in the Rocky Mountains. And that's a pretty big warning sign for Mormon. And I don't really like the way that the Mormon church is so preachy, so aggressively proselytizing. And this book is one of those where if I had known that it was secretly Mormon kind of book, I wouldn't have picked it up in the first place. I saw the Druid and thought, oh, so like Celtic versus church kind of things. But really it's Celtic Mormon versus church, and that just does not sit well with me. He picked a name that would entice people that wouldn't otherwise be interested if they knew what it was actually about. It's kind of too on the nose for me to like it. Now, if reading secretly Mormon kind of things is okay with you, then this may be a good fantasy series. But if you don't like reading the whole Mormon influence kind of thing, this is not a good book for you. And it's certainly not a good book for me. I don't remember how much I paid for this, but I know I bought it at Coas, and I'm willing to bet it was around $8. I honestly feel like it's $8 not well spent, and I would rather have put that $8 towards some other book. But yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.